Janeites, and welcome back to the What the Austen podcast. Today we are doing another character study, and it's the second one in my Ella's for Liability series, and we're going to be covering Lydia Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. So Lydia is the youngest of the five Bennet sisters, and she is pretty notorious for being impulsive and reckless and all around just a little bit crazy. But today joining me is the wonderful Lynette from the StoryHooked Podcast, which is a bookish podcast you need to check out. You chat with bookstagrammers, authors. It's just basically embracing your love of reading.
Basically, yeah, it's everything. There's so much on there. I can't really narrow it down because I just love so much stuff. I'm like, I love Jane Austen. I love fantasy. I love authors. I love bookstagram. It's kind of a big hot mess. It's kind of crazy, but I have a lot of fun with it. So
I kind of love that though, because like with my podcast here, I'm so niched in, whereas like you're just like, we just do everything bookish, and that is a vibe.
You're so sweet. I love your podcast too, I will say. Jane Austen, talking about just Jane Austen, like that's the dream. That is amazing.
Jane Austen all the time. That's what we're here for.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm like totally hyped to have you on the podcast though, because we've been chatting quite a bit outside of obviously this recording and about Austen, obviously, and then other bookish things. But I'd love to know what sparked the idea to start StoryHooked.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So StoryHooked it was kind of an idea from me and my friend Mikkel. Started it in September of 2021. So oh my gosh, it's coming up on 2 years now. That's crazy. When did that happen? Whoa. Isn't that just crazy? So she and I have been best friends since we were like 9. Like we've known each other for years. And then we grew up together, and then we like went to college and got married and started having kids, and all of a sudden we realized like we didn't really talk anymore, and it was super sad, right? It was like kind of a bummer because we've been best friends for so long. And we started talking about books, and Mikkel was like, hey, do you want to like do a bookstagram? Do you want to do a podcast? This would be so fun. We could just read books and talk about them. And I was like, shut up. Yes, I do. I absolutely want to do that. And she's like, all right, let's do it. So we just jumped in with both feet. She had done podcasting before. I never had. I just like went in, totally had no idea what I was doing. But I was like, this is fun. Let's go. Because I just wanted to have fun. It was just something that brought so much joy into my life. All of a sudden I was like back into reading. I was back into something that, because I've been a huge reader since I was a kid, and then I kind of forgot about it. You kind of lose it when you kind of go to college or you go to school, and then they make you read books that maybe you didn't want to read, or you know what I mean?
You're forced to read, and it's like dries you up. Yeah, I know.
Yes, and then you're also, I don't like reading. It's like, no, you just didn't find the right book yet. So exactly. So we started it just for fun and started reading again. And all of a sudden, boom, I realized this is my calling. This is my life. Like, ever since becoming a mom, you kind of like lose yourself a little bit. You're like, who am I? Who am I really? And finding books and reading again was so wonderful. It was so, and podcasting, and just, it was so fun. You were making connections with people from like with you, from people from all around the world, making friends with people that love the stuff that you do. And that's kind of how it started. I don't know if I like totally went on a tangent there, but basically started as like a way for me and my friend to reconnect and talk about books. And then it's just like taken off, and it's become just this big thing for me that's like kind of like my creative outlet. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's kind of where StoryHooked came from. Yeah.
No, I love that, because obviously from you reconnecting with Mikkel, that kind of sparked it. But then that's also means so many other people can like reconnect or connect over books and things. And I just think that's the best thing about the Bookstagram community, honestly. It amazes me how many friends I've made. It honestly blows my mind a little bit. I'm like, it's just like, how is this like possible? Like, it's not even a world that I even saw before I started it. And it's just so nice. Everybody's so kind and supportive, and people just love books, and that's awesome.
And it's awesome, right? I'm like, these are my people. You are my freaking people. And my husband was like, I'll be like, oh, I was talking to my friend. He's like, is this a like, in person friend, or is this one of your Bookstagram friends? And I'm like, oh, this is my Bookstagram friends. Like, they're real friends. It's so cool. I would have never seen this back when I was a kid. It was always, don't talk to people on the internet. And now I'm like, all my bestest friends are on the internet.
So, looking at Lydia Bennet today, we're going to seek to understand her role in the story as a whole, the impact that she has on the plot, and the broader themes that she represents. So, I love doing these deep dives on secondary characters because there's always so much to unpack. And also, I always have so many different ideas. Like, I oscillate between different thoughts. I feel like Pride and Prejudice, you get so caught up with Elizabeth Bennet that because she's so spirited and intelligent and she's our protagonist and we love her. But
yeah, we do.
The book would not be the same without Lydia, right? So I think she deserves an episode.
She really does. I agree. I mean, there's a major plot point that she is like the face of that kind of brings Lizzie and Darcy together. I mean, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that would, I think maybe they'd eventually work out, but that is like the climax of the story is where this dramatic thing happens. And it's like, and then Lizzie and Darcy are like, they're on the same team all of a sudden, you know? And it's like, Lydia, kind of like made that happen, you know?
I know, she's like literally like a catalyst for everything that happens. And I love that. Yeah. Exactly. This is definitely why I thought like we've got to do an episode on just her on her own. Obviously falls into my L is for Liability series, which I'm going to be clear, this is not about Lynette, obviously your name begins with L. Oh my gosh, it is so funny, you know, I had Leia on to do which one did we do together? We did a different one. Oh, Lucy Steele. Yeah.
Yes, Lucy. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, and me and Leia did that, and Leia was like, my name begins with L as well. I was like, oh my god, I keep picking guests whose names begin with L.
Maybe...
so embarrassing.
Oh no, I don't think that's a coincidence. Clearly there's something going on here. You got a theme. No, I'm just kidding.
L in your case means lovable and likable and not liability at all. Let's be clear.
Well, thanks. Oh, shucks. You're so sweet.
But before we get into the bulk of the content then, I would love to ask you what I ask all my guests, and that is, what got you into Jane Austen originally?
Okay, I love this question so much because Jane has always been like, basically, I grew up reading books. I grew up loving books. My father would take me to the library every Saturday. Every weekend, I was walking out with just these stacks and stacks of books. And my dad really did influence that a lot. And he would often find books and recommend them to me and say, hey, you should try this book. I think you'd like it. And I'm like, sure, Dad, whatever. And then I'll try it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I really do love this. And so he kind of nudged me in the direction of like Jane Austen's stories, the classics. And even though I was pretty young and I didn't exactly understand what was going on, I mean, I still don't exactly understand what's going on because her language is obviously, you know, different than what we talk about now. But I still, just at a very young age, I wanted to understand the story. And my dad was like, yeah, you should try this. And he kind of would help me understand it and kind of explain things that I didn't get what was going on, which was nice. So that was kind of like the first exposure to it. But I really started getting into it, I would say probably in high school. This is going to make you laugh, but it was required reading was Pride and Prejudice, but they also, in my school, this is so funny, they said you can either read Pride and Prejudice or read Pride and Prejudice Zombies, and they counted it as the credit. Isn't that insane? Yeah.
Don't even.
I know,
God.
Right? And so, as a high school student, I'm like, of course I'm going to read the original Pride and Prejudice because huge Enemies to Lovers fan. I've been Enemies to Lovers stan forever. And I'm like, I'm reading this. I'm reading the OG. Like, are you kidding me? And then a bunch of my friends were like, I'm reading Pride and Prejudice Zombies because I'm not going to read Pride and Prejudice. I'm like, you guys are the... Anyways, it was just so funny. It's kind of split the class. A lot of the boys read the zombie one. And it was like our teacher was like, it's fine if you do that. And I'm like, what?
That is not okay, friend.
Yeah, like, how dare you? How dare you? Not hating on Pride and Prejudice Zombies, but I was like, really though? I mean, really? So that was when I read it, I think, as a high school student at like an age where I was really understanding the story. Does that make sense? Because as a child, once again, you kind of like don't really know what's going on. But that was how I started reading Pride and Prejudice, obviously. And I would say that one's my favorite of the Jane Austen novels. But that was my gateway drug into Jane Austen was obviously the Enemies to Lovers, Pride and Prejudice, because I loved it so much. And then I found Emma and I was like, I love this story so much. I love Knightley. I just love him. I connect to him so well. And then Emma as a character, also, I think that I just relate to her so much. So I just loved Emma and Knightley and their whole story. And that was become probably my favorite too. So I'd say Pride and Prejudice and Emma are kind of like right here. Um, which is hard for me to choose because Emma, I feel like if I were a character, I would be her. Does that make sense? And then Knightley is definitely like kind of reminds me of my husband a little bit, which is really funny. He's kind of like I don't know how to explain it, but anyways, our relationship is kind of like Emma and Knightley. And then, but you can't not love Pride and Prejudice. I don't know. Anyways, all of the stories are great. I know I'm kind of rambling here, but how I got into Jane Austen was my dad recommended it to me, and then I really read it in high school, fell in love with Jane Austen's novels as a high school student, I just loved romance and these beautiful, beautiful stories because Jane does such an amazing job with it. And then the themes in it were so deep too, and I loved thinking about those as well. So that's kind of how I got into Jane. And then when I started StoryHooked, I went to the bookstore with my friend Mikkel, and I saw this gorgeous edition of Pride and Prejudice. It was so beautiful. And I was like, that is so pretty. And then I saw another one. And then I saw another one. And then I saw another one.
We all know this journey.
We all know where this is going. I was like, I'm going to collect these. So I started buying them. And anytime I saw one, I would just like, if I wanted it, I got it. I want it. I got it. I want it. I got it. And that became kind of my serious obsession, was just a couple years ago finding a few copies that were pretty, that were beautiful covers, and I'm like, I need these. So now I collect those, and I collect Emmas. I think I have over 100 Pride and Prejudice and about 50 Emmas. It's insane, but I love it. It makes me so happy.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Yeah, I remember when you told me that you had like over 100 copies. I was like, wow. Like, I am so impressed. Like, I mean, I collect them, but I was like, that is a lot. That is a lot of copies.
It is a lot. It's kind of insane. It's a little bit crazy. My husband's like, oh my gosh. I'm like, who am I going to leave this to? Like, this is an amazing collection. And he's like, what?
Oh my gosh, so funny.
That's how we connected, right? We connected over our Pride and Prejudice collection. I remember.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yeah, because I did my reel where I was showing like the ones that I have. Yes. Oh my gosh, that's so funny when I think back to that.
Yeah.
I had one of my closest friends said to me once, she was like, reading books and like buying or collecting books are two entirely different hobbies, and I've never related to something so much in my life. Like, that is so true. And thank you for justifying the fact that I have no money in my bank account. It's okay.
It's okay, because you're getting happiness from the book. So if you need money, money's not bringing you happiness. The stuff.
I know, right? Kidding. Yeah, exactly. It's okay. The words will nourish us. It's fine.
We don't need food. The words will nourish us. You're so...
Oh dear, it's amazing. Oh, I love that though. No, and it's so good to hear how you got into Austen as well, because I feel like a lot of people's journeys are different. I think most people do start with Pride and Prejudice a lot of the times because it is on curriculums for schools. Yeah. But yeah, Emma's such a good one as well. I know we bonded over all of Emma too, so.
Yes, we did. I bet people are like, people don't like Emma. I'm like, I love her.
We're
Stop hating on my girl. Emma. We love Emma. How can you not? And then when Jane Austen's like, I wrote someone that only I would love. I'm like, no, we love her too.
Love her. I know, it's so true. Yeah, she's definitely Marmite as a character, but I love her, and I can really relate to her as well. Like, honestly, I'm like, wow, I feel like I have a lot in common with Emma. Not the snobbiness though.
Right, right. Yeah, very much. Hopefully not. I'm like, am I a snob? Shoot. Oh well.
Disaster. But today's character that we're covering is actually Lydia Bennet, like I said. Lydia. So I thought it would be good to start with the initial like description and traits that are kind of mentioned in the novel. So her initial description is she's described as a stout, well-grown girl of 15 with a fine complexion, good-humoured countenance, and she's the tallest sister. And then throughout the novel, she's also considered self-willed, careless, ignorant, idle, and vain. So she's got a lot going for her, you know. Sounds great. It sounds like a hell of a combination. Not really sure what Jane Austen was. Obviously, Jane Austen was setting her up to be like a crazy person, you know. She wasn't set up for success, was she? Let's be clear. Not with those descriptors.
No, for sure. She definitely was like, I Jane created a character for, there was definitely a story and a reason that she made her that way. 100%. I think what's funny, when I read the description of Lydia, I was cracking up because she's like, I'm the youngest, but I'm the tallest. Like, that is such a youngest child thing to say. I don't know. Are you a youngest child, or do you have any siblings, or?
I'm a middle child.
Middle, same.
But that's something my brother would say. He'd be like, I'm the tallest out of all of you.
Exactly. My little brother, who's the youngest, is also the tallest. What is with that? What is with that? And they're all like, I'm the young, but I'm tall. Like, it's just so funny. I feel like she's the quintessential youngest child. She just fits the vibe. She fits a youngest child thing. And when it describes her at 15, I'm thinking, when I was 15 years old, I was pretty vain and pretty like lazy and like whatever. When I was a teenager, when you're 15, you're just like la la la, like life is great, whatever. You know what I mean? So I kind of relate.
Yeah, and I think that's like such a good point as well, because the thing that I was going backwards and forwards on a lot with Lydia was like, is she just like immature in because she's 15, and she's not had that much life experience, that's why she's crazy? Or is she actually like a mean girl? And I keep going backwards and forwards with it. But I think back to when I was 15, and honestly, I was so dramatic. And you are a little bit like obsessed with boys, and like you said, you're a bit vain, and things are a bit wild. Like if you read like some of my diaries when I was 15, honestly, I was so dramatic. It was like the world was gonna end, or I was on like a total high. There was no middle ground. So I can kind of get that a lot of her attributes are linked to her age.
Yes.
But I'd love to know your thoughts.
No, for sure. I'm totally with you. I agree. Journals and stuff, diaries that I wrote when I was that age, I'm like, dang, girl, like you are just so, it fits the age, right? As you say, immature. And I think that a lot of it is her age for Lydia, for sure. But I also think that there's definitely some personality things in there that kind of, just make it more so, you know what I mean? It just makes it more dramatic, and as well as her background as how she was raised. I think that it just is a big giant it's just a big mess. It's just the perfect storm, basically. Everything just makes it bigger and more dramatic because, and the reason I think this is because you've got these Bennett sisters that were all raised same parents, same background, and yet they're all so different. But it would be interesting to jump into the Pride and Prejudice story to see what Jane or Lizzie were like when they were that age, right? Like, what were they like when they were 15? Were they more sensible, as Jane is described as sensible, or just really intelligent with Lizzie? And so I think it's kind of just a combination of all of it,
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, unfortunately for Lydia, because she was like the last hope for a son, I think a lot of like, especially on Mr. Bennett's side, a lot of disappointment falls on Lydia just naturally. Like, even without her doing anything, she's automatically like a disappointment. Like, I know it sounds so harsh, but that's the case.
It is the case. You're right. That is so. I didn't even think about that, but that is so true. That is so true. She's already a disappointment. That's sad, but it's, yeah, exactly. And you can kind of see that in the way that Mr. Bennet kind of leaves her alone, kind of,
Yeah, and if he does say anything, it's always like something that's not very kind. And I can imagine that does bring up quite a lot of insecurities. Like, if your dad's always saying like, oh, you're really silly, like you're stupid and things, I can understand why some personality types, for them, that would mean like, right, well, I'm going to kind of lean into what you're saying about me, because like as a way of rebellion, like as a way to rebel against the parent figure, is to be like, well, if you keep saying this about me, then I will be that. I will be the person that you're saying. It's a bit like when someone like villainizes you and you're like, you want me to be the villain, I'll be the villain.
Villain origin story. This is my villain era. I'm doing it. It's like, yeah, that is so true. That is so true. It's in lots of stories, I feel like that happens, where the villain is often kind of pushed into it. Like, I'm trying to think of an example. This is, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Lion King, but I read some like Reddit on it where they said that Scar's name was like translated from the language meant garbage, and it was like, no wonder Garbage wanted to kill his family because they named him Garbage. And I was like, that's so sad. Like that you lean into kind of that stereotype, or you lean into kind of what your parents put on you, and it's sad, but it's true. It's totally true.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, obviously, she's kind of brought back a little bit in the fact that she is, in the
Right.
book, she is described as Mrs. Bennet's favorite child. Um, and,
Yeah.
a lot of people say it's because they're so similar, and it's like Mrs. Bennet sees a lot of herself in Lydia, and so she kind of put a lot of work into it. And I can't remember if I read or heard this, but someone made a good point of saying for Mr. Bennet, obviously it's a disappointment because he didn't get the son that he needed to kind of help the finances. But for Mrs. Bennet, that's her final child, and she knew she wasn't going to have any more. So it's like, did she put so much like love and affection into this child because she was like, well, this is my last one. But in a different way than you do with like your first children, where your first children probably get, I don't want to. This sounds really bad, but they kind of get the best of you because you're the youngest you've ever been having a child, and you've got all the energy and all the motivation, and you really want them to succeed. And then I guess the more children you have, the harder it is to maintain that level of like energy and just like gumption, because you get older and like you learn and you grow.
Yeah, exactly. I can relate just as a mom. I mean, I have four kids, and and my energy is like I do not have any energy. Doing this is like gonna take a lot out of me. Doing this podcast, because I'll be like going upstairs like, guys, I just need sleep. Please leave me alone. No, I'm just kidding. But I can relate to that as a mom. Like, and as you get more experience with more kids, you get a little more lax. You get a little less strict. You just, with your oldest, you're like, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, which is very much how Mrs. Bennet treats Jane. She's like, we're gonna do this, and you're gonna go get that. You're gonna go get those 20,000 pounds a year or whatever he had or Bingley had. And she's like, we're doing this. And then with Lydia, it's totally like, oh, do whatever you want, like whatever. It's very much a youngest child thing. So I can see it being just a natural thing for Mrs. Bennet. Are they similar? Yeah. Is Mrs. Bennet and Lydia very similar? Yeah. But I think it is definitely a parent-child thing with being the youngest, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And I think Mrs. Bennet, I think her lapse in judgment comes that she kind of supports or kind of buys into Lydia's like fantasies, where Lydia's like obsessing about all these like officers all the time, and she's allowed to just go off with like random men constantly and do her own thing with Kitty. And Mrs. Bennet's not like, oh, hang on a second, we should be cautious here. She's just like, oh, I liked her red coat myself, like at one point. And it's like, isn't this like so polar opposite with Jane? She's literally just like, Jane, like you've got to be like perfect, like this is very serious. It makes me think of when like when the servant's like helping Kitty, and she's just like, hang Kitty, like God, sort Jane out. Jane is the one that's important. And yeah, I just feel like Lydia and Kitty were just allowed to just run free. And I feel like because of that, one, I don't think they built up an understanding of like the dangers of society and the risks out there.
Right.
But also like obviously even if they did know that, I feel like maybe as younger children they're a bit more rebellious, and they're a
Yeah.
bit more they take more risks potentially. But I think
Yeah.
they were allowed to too much freedom in the sense that, I mean, obviously we see it backfires in the novel, but
Yeah.
Wickham is not the first officer she's like all over.
Throwing
We hear
herself
about
at.
like Captain
Yeah.
Carter, and and she's like basically stalking some of them. She's like, I heard that he goes to this place quite a lot, and well, you know what I mean? And nobody's like, hang on, Lydia, it's a bit weird. Like, you shouldn't be stalking men. Like,
Yeah, like
it's not good.
what's
It's not
going
good.
on? No, yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that. Wickham was not her first like go at it. She was just like, woo, let's go, like all the boys. And as a boy crazy teenager, I once again I'm like, yeah, I was like any guy that like remotely gave me any attention, I was like, yeah, let's go.
We're all in, okay?
We're all in. Lydia was all in, and I think that yeah, that society at that time for her, I mean, it's kind of sad, but being like, you need to get married, you need to have a husband, and that even made her probably more boy crazy, because it's like that's what you do. That's probably what your parents are pushing you into. Like, oh no, you know what I mean? It's kind of sad.
It's so true. Yeah, on the one hand, it's like she wants the attention that most teen girls want, but the tragedy of her is that she gets married and locked into a union with a guy who's just awful. And it's such a young age
Yeah.
as well. Like, she doesn't even get to. I just want to experiment seems like the wrong word, but she doesn't get to like experiment with
No,
life. Like, she
yeah.
genuinely gets locked in with the worst guy ever. Like, most people in their life maybe have a Wickham at one point, and he's just
Oh,
like
yeah.
he's like he happens, and then he's gone.
You move
But
on.
Lydia, like, can you imagine? Lydia ends up with her Wickham, and that is just so tragic for her, I think.
I've never thought of it like that, that her story is a tragedy. It totally is. You're right. I've never thought of it like that because I've always looked at her and been like, oh, like, she's kind of silly. She's funny. It's like, oh, she kind of becomes, oh, and I thought about this really deeply. Tell me what you think about this. But she becomes the face of the tragedy. She's like, Lydia went and did this. Lydia went and ran away with Wickham. Lydia, this. It's like, hold on. There are two people in this story. There are two freaking people. And we're like, Lydia. It's like, no. Wickham. Wickham is the problem. He is a womanizer. He is such a problem. And all of a sudden we're like, Lydia ran away with him. It's like, no, maybe he ran away with Lydia. Like, does she have some responsibility? Yeah, but why is the woman always blamed? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh my goodness. I've honestly been thinking about this a lot lately. I can't remember where I saw it, but I saw a post that was saying like, women are often villainized by men or by society, but they usually leave out the ways in which that woman was antagonized to get there, that kind of thing. And I know it's slightly different, but the point is, yes, like, women are put in, like, they're put in the position where it looks like they are the problem, they are the issue, they are the ones in the wrong, right? Yeah, you're so right. And let's be perfectly clear, Wickham essentially kidnapped Lydia because she was 15. Yeah. So she doesn't know any better. Her family are far away. She was under the protection of another family. So technically he kidnapped her, and we should be calling Wickham out.
Wickham is the liability. What is it? W for worst person ever. I don't know. He is just he essentially, you're right. He basically kidnapped her and was like just, and we know that this is not his first offense with Darcy's sister, right? We know this is not his first like go at it. And so just so while studying Lydia is fascinating, I'm like, she also kind of had the cards stacked against her, and that is it. If I get really deep into it, I start to get really mad. So we won't talk about it too much, but I get pretty fired up that I'm like, this is not fair that it happened to her, It's like,
Yeah. Wickham gets such an easy pass because even when he did it with Georgiana, Darcy kept that quiet. And so he was able to go and do it again. And then with the Lydia situation, he gets loads of money, he's married off to her, and gets a new job up north. And it's like, what does he really suffer for his crimes? Nothing. And we can imagine that Lydia probably has the worst life with him. Like, I know that she likes going out and stuff, but I feel like we said, because she's young, that might be just an aspect of her youth. And when she gets older, that might not be what she wants. She might not want to party all the time. She might not want to be socializing constantly. But she is like trapped with this just like horrific person now.
Yeah, okay, I didn't even think about that she, especially at the time, like, she's trapped. Like, there's literally nothing she can do. And like you said, her lifestyle might change, her personality. Is it youth or is it her actual personality? But what is Wickham even gonna do? Because obviously it's not a match of love. I don't know. It's just I'm very curious. Like, if we could get into Jane's brain, if we could ask Jane Austen, be like, where are they now? How did Lydia and Wickham end up? Because they were pushed together, maybe not what they wanted, but it's what had to happen. That is so, I would just love to ask her that. Like, Jane, tell us. Spill the tea. Tell us what's really going on.
What happened? I can imagine it was tragic. Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
I mean, you can just like speculate, but I can imagine it was just like the worst situation because he wouldn't be loyal to Lydia. Like, he didn't even want to marry her anyway. He was literally it was literally just for his own amusement. And I genuinely think as well that Lydia is such a victim of society because, like, I think it partly is Mr. Bennett's fault because he sees marriage so much as a transaction that he thinks Lydia is not at risk to be taken advantage of because she's poor, but he's blind to the fact that some people just do things for their own amusement or short-term rewards, like, without thinking about the long-term consequences for others. And society obviously was not protecting these, like, younger women, like these young women in society who are just like out doing stuff, or like the family that she was staying with. Like, I know that she's like secretive and things, but wouldn't you be like, oh, she's spending a lot of time with that Wickham guy, he's not so great, let's use. Or do you know when you come back and everybody in Meryton apparently has a story about how Mr. Wickham's a bad guy, but yet everybody failed to mention that until him and Lydia like get together, and it's like, where was everyone keeping these stories quiet? Like, what?
Yeah, why were you all protecting him? Like, Darcy's we can sort of understand because he was trying to like protect his sister, but what are all these other people's motivations? They're like, wait a second, I heard something about him. I'm like, you could have said that sooner. We could have done something for this girl. Come on.
Literally, but she is kind of thrown under the bus a little bit, and whether or not that's just Jane Austen's way because she needed a catalyst for, obviously it was like him rescuing in a sense, not really, but like him sorting the Lydia
sorted it out,
Wickham situation obviously played a massive part in the plot and was one of the main things that sways Lizzie to reconsider her thoughts on Darcy and be like, you know what, he's a really great guy, he's like saved my family, that's awesome. We have to just sacrifice Lydia for it.
Something's got to happen, and Lydia becomes the fallout, and that is tragic for her. Happy for Darcy and Lizzie, but oh man, it just shows how Jane. None of her characters were really like a how do you say? Her characters all definitely had a purpose. And that was definitely for Lydia, kind of like you said, it kind of made the ball start rolling.
Yeah, I actually wrote about this once, about the ways in which Jane Austen can be like really brutal with minor characters, where they can literally be a means to an end, and she can definitely just like sacrifice people, cut people off if they just like, you know, are no longer needed, or they were just like a point for the plot. And like, I think that's like fascinating. I think is what's really strange is Lydia has such a big part in the plot. She's almost like a minor character who becomes major just because of her actions. Yeah.
Oh, that's so true. I never even thought of it like that. She's a minor character for the entire book, and then just boom, she's just thrown right there into the front for sure. Yeah, that's a good point. Jane is brutal with those characters. Sometimes I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, right. Honestly, like kind of like blows my mind a little bit, but something that makes me think, like with Lydia though, like I know like we're saying about her age and she's like naive and stuff, there's two things that put me on the other side of the argument for Lydia. One of them is the way that she, like her relationship with Kitty, like it says in the book that she was like completely under Lydia's guidance, and she was almost like manipulative to Kitty, like to get Kitty to do stuff. And also the fact that she has no notion of how bad her elopement is, and the fact that like she looks down on her older sisters, where she's literally just like, you're not married, I'm not married, everyone should go to Brighton for her husband. And it's like, what? Like, what are you actually on?
Yeah, like what is going on? I mean, sibling dynamics. I am a middle child. You said you're also a middle child, so we get it. Middle children, we're just great. I mean, no, I'm just kidding. See, look at me being all vain. But like the oldest, they're kind of like, oh, we get pushed into these roles of like, I'm more responsible. Middle children have this stereotype of being forgotten, and the youngest children just get to do whatever they want. I mean, the theme is the same with these sisters. But and I will say, when a youngest child is like, does anything that remotely puts them like, I did something before my oldest child, which I feel like something interesting. I talked to my husband about this. He's an oldest, very responsible, but he noticed that when in like his lifeline, if his younger siblings did something before he did, he felt kind of weird. He's like, wait, is this my weird oldest child like syndrome coming to the forefront, being like, I need to be the first at things because I'm the oldest, right? And so for youngest kids, when they're like, I did something before you, ha ha ha, like that is like a very much a youngest child thing, where it's like, I know everything and I'm so wise, and like, you know what I mean?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I've actually experienced them, not myself, but with like a friend,
Yeah.
where one of their younger siblings like bought a house before they did. And they like bought a house then within like 4 months. They were like, gotta get this sorted. Like it was like a crisis for them. Like they had to do it because one of their younger siblings had done it first. And everybody's on different timelines. Like I don't think we should rush anything, but it's so true. Like there is this weird dynamic, like for older siblings, like to be the first to certain things because they think that's their role and their responsibility to do that, kind of lead the way. In a sense.
Yeah, totally. And my husband's like, he knows that, hey, everyone's timeline's different. When you and your siblings become adults, it's kind of like you just do what you do when it happens. But there's still this kind of subconscious. He tells me there's a subconscious thing that's like, I need to be first. And he's like, wait, no, I don't. Kind of have to let that simmer down a little bit. So I wonder if anyone that are youngest children ever feel like this weird, maybe subconscious need to like almost overcompensate or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yes, that's such a good point. And also that does ease the like that, because I was looking at it like, oh, is it she just being like really mean? And she's just like, I'm gonna just say to you all, like, I've got this husband and you guys just like on your own, blah blah blah. But actually the way that looking at it that way I think makes more sense as well, because she is young, she's still got time to like grow. And also, it doesn't make sense unless you take her age into consideration. The fact that she doesn't see the consequences of what she's done, the fact that she doesn't see the issue. Because I'm like, with age, I feel like she would see the issue. But I feel like the fact that she doesn't shows that she's young and that everything that she does is blurred by her age.
Yeah. No, for sure. I totally agree with that. When you were saying that it just totally goes over her head, or she's like unaware of what's going on. That's what blows my mind. And in the book, in the movies, I love the movies. I love the movies that depict this. She's just like, so, yeah, everything worked out great, and I've got a husband, and everyone should do what I did. And you're like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, do you know what happened? Like, do you realize that this was like the dumbest thing that he did, that Wickham did? Do you realize how bad this is? Because it doesn't seem like she knows at all. She's just like, yeah, I got married, woohoo. It's like, wait, what? Where are you?
Right?
What is happening?
I feel like she doesn't even recognize like the significance of marriage either, because she's like, she chooses Wickham, and like we've been saying, she was interested in all these different officers, all these different guys. She didn't choose Wickham because she's like, oh, my soulmate, here it is, Mr. Wickham. I know he's been like around all the time, but he's actually my soulmate. That wasn't the choice that she made. And so I don't know if she realizes like the significance of marriage, that she is now locked in with this person for the rest of her life. And maybe both of them would have like Wickham definitely would have a wandering eye and like tendencies to like go for other people. But I can see Lydia having to be the same as well, because she will like wake up and realize, actually, like, who is this person? This is somebody that I had a crush on when I was 15 and who took advantage of me. And look where I'm at now. Like, I'm married to this person, and yeah, again, it kind of shows the way that she's kind of sacrificed, because we think, oh, yay, great for Darcy sorting that, but Darcy basically locks Lydia into, like, the worst situation.
Yes, exactly. Darcy's like, I saved you. It's like, did you save the family name? Because you did not save Lydia. You put her with freaking Wickham, and knowing, I mean, obviously with the society at the time, I'm sure Darcy did everything that he possibly could. It sucks that it turned out that way for sure, because he knows what Wickham's like. He saw what he was doing with his sister, and so he kind of like put him on Lizzie's sister, like, oh my gosh. But obviously I do think that he probably did the best that he could with what they had at the time, because that's probably literally the only way that there could be some kind of salvaging of what was going on. But I'm just imagining, like, I do this a lot with books. I don't know if you do this, but do you read books and kind of internalize the story? I do it all the time. Like I am the main character. Like, I am. Do you know what I mean? I internalize the story, but thinking about it with Pride and Prejudice, I'm thinking, okay, if I internalize it, the guy that I had a crush on when I was 15, and I was like, I could totally, in my mind, as a 15-year-old, I'm like, oh, I could totally marry him, like, and we'd be, like, so in love, and da-da-da-da, and it was very fanciful, like, my perception of what marriage was, of how it was this just, like, you're in love, and it's, like, magic, and it is, I mean, you know, it is. I do love romance, and I think that it is a beautiful thing to find your person and choose them and go through life together is so beautiful, obviously. It's a beautiful thing. But as a 15-year-old, I think that my perception of what it would actually be like was so different than what it actually is, you know? So I think that Lydia, like you said, she definitely does not know what's going on, has a very probably just fanciful, like, oh, this is so wonderful, because of her age and just kind of lack of understanding of it. Because who understands marriage at 15? Like, obviously nobody, which is why her being pushed into it or being dragged into it by Wickham is so tragic, right? Because she was so young. But it's like what you were saying, what would she think when she's older and more mature? You know, how would she perceive what actually happened? Because right now in the story, it's like, woohoo, like I'm married, this is great. But in a few years, what's really going to be going on in her mind? You know, I'm super curious. I just want to talk to Jane. I just want to talk to Jane about it.
Yes, no, oh my God. I love what you said as well. It's so true. Like, it is so fanciful when you're like 15. Also, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but even just a committed relationship when you're 15 is a lot to ask of somebody. Like, when you're going through like puberty, your hormones are everywhere. In like, you know, you tend to interact with the people that you're interested in when you're that age at things like parties or just like walking downtown together, or just, you know, there's things that you do that aren't realistic to like a committed relationship or like married life together. It's not like the mundane activities like cooking dinner or like doing the washing or, you know, like, and yes, there's like, there are the elements that you keep in because it does make life magical, like the romantic aspects, but you only have that when you're 15 because you live with your parents. Like, you're not going to be doing your washing with your crush at 15, are you? Like, that's just it's not what you do. And so you like, you only have the magical moments, you know, and you only have the times where you're kind of forced together, or usually you're around friends as well. So it's really different. It's a different dynamic. And that is very much what Wickham pops her out of. Yeah. Like, but even when she's with him to start with, it's still like when they're on the run, I can imagine it's still all of those like magical, like it's all just like fun and games. We're all having the best time. Yeah. And we can definitely assume that they were like sleeping together, you know, going around. And so everything was novelty. But yeah, it's like after that, like what even is it? And
how would reality come crashing down, and just how would reality really feel like to her? And I think, okay, if I ended up in a committed relationship with the person that I had a crush on at 15, I have no idea what that would actually be like. Like, or this person that I thought that I wanted to be with. Like, you know, like you were saying, we all had our Wickhams or have our Wickhams, so that we're like, whoa, phew, like, dodged that bullet. So glad that like didn't actually happen. But for her, it actually did. And I'm like, oh, that would be so awful if that actually, just, it's just a mess.
No, literally. Yeah, absolutely. It's just like, it's pretty crazy when you think about it like that way. Like, and obviously we have the benefit of coming to it from like, obviously
an outside
perspective,
modern times.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like now we'd be like, this is an actual crisis that Wickham needs to be in prison. But but like obviously at the time of the book it was slightly different, but I think it was still quite shocking, because if you think about the way that Lady Catherine, like when she asks which of her sisters are out, and she finds out that like Lydia's out and she's the youngest and she's like 15, like Lady Catherine's literally just like, what? Like, why is that even a thing? And so I actually think a lot of it falls onto like Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, where they are just like not taking it seriously, because it seems like there are other people who are like, oh, that's like dangerous or not so great. And obviously Mr. Darcy makes a comment on the way that Lydia and Kitty behave, where he's like, you know, this is like not acceptable in society. But they just have no guidance. They're just like left to run around free. And it is, I'm honestly falling on the side that it's such a tragedy, and I feel so bad for Lydia. Like, I know I called her a liability, and I guess she is to an extent, but now I'm also just like, kind of feel bad for her.
Yeah, exactly. She's kind of a victim of how society made her to be, combined with her youth. I mean, it's really not fair. It's really not fair, in my opinion, and it makes for a great story, though, I will say. It makes for a great story, and it's fun, but it's also tragic, like what you said. And an interesting thing that when I was thinking about this more, Lady Catherine, who, I mean, in the books, in the movies, she is just a real piece of work, you know, but she's also just, I think, very traditional, someone who reflects her age. She doesn't have a filter because she's old, and old people don't have filters. They just say whatever the heck they want, and they say mean things, but it's fine because they're old, right? So I don't know, it's with Catherine, with Lady Catherine, who just, she's a fascinating character. She'd be fun to talk about too, but she, when she says the youngest out before the eldest, she's, you know, saying, hey, that's not the traditional rules. You know, she's following tradition. She's not, I mean, maybe she's being mean about it, but she is just kind of saying, that's not typical. And then when she says, you didn't have a governess, that must have been like, what you mean, how were you taught? How were you raised? And her question is totally valid. How were they raised? Like you said, they just kind of just went, they just were kind of running free. And it's, I don't know if it's because of money. I mean, maybe you would know this better than me, like not having a governess because of not being able to afford it, or if it's just what the Bennets decided to do. I don't know. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I think potentially cost, because it would be quite expensive to keep a governess. And a governess wasn't like, it's not like, you know, you keep a nanny for like 2 years. Like usually a governess follows them through their entire life. Like if you think about Emma and Miss Taylor, like this is somebody who lives with you, and maybe they'd struggle to find one as well. Like 5 daughters in a house, that's a lot.
Yeah,
you've got to think the Bennett's like relationship, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, like Mr. Bennet's not that interested in Mrs. Bennet, so Mrs. Bennet probably liked the fact that she was super busy with all of her children all the time.
Right, she was in charge, she was the boss, yeah.
Yeah, and so, yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but I would say like cost, and also maybe a bit of like Mrs. Bennet's kind of not wanting to be on her own and wanting like the company and purpose as well, I think is probably quite a, like, I think she would want purpose in her life, and I genuinely think like raising her children really does that. Like she really steps the plate. Like I know she's a bit crazy at times, but she really does.
She loves her daughters.
Give her all for her children. Yeah, she gives them her all. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so I think partly that as well.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That makes sense. No, I love what you said. I knew that you probably have a good perspective on that. So it's just, yeah. Lydia's a fascinating character. She is fun. She was fun to unpack because I've never done that before, and it was fun to think about it and more deeply for sure.
Yeah, I think so. And I think like obviously she's got all these qualities that aren't so ideal, but also like the way that Kitty is older than her and she's able to be like the leader in that sense. And also go into these like groups of like officers and things and be confident. So I think she actually does have quite a few like really good qualities. She's obviously respected among her peers. She is lively and confident, and let's be honest, those are the qualities that Jane Austen often tells us are important and good. It's just that Lydia takes it too far and she has no like propriety or no restraint, and she's just, yeah, nobody kind of reins her back in.
Right, exactly. I think that a lot of, and I think this even about just human beings in general, I think that all characteristics that we have in our personality can be good or bad, depending on the situation. So you can say about Lydia, you can say she's confident, she's outgoing, she's fun. And all of that is like stuff that we love in a person. I love going out and doing fun things with friends. I love being confident and funny and making people laugh, and being silly as a teenager is a lot of fun. I look at teenagers now and I'm like, was I that silly and ridiculous as a teenager? Oh yeah, I definitely was. But you look at them now and you're like, oh my gosh, really? But when you're in it, it's just so much fun. It's so great. You know what I mean? So those are great characteristics that in this society or in this situation for Lydia become a liability. So I think that every characteristic that all of us have can be a liability in this situation, but in this situation it is a great thing. It is a great thing. It just depends. And that's why it's so, I think life is so hard. I know I'm getting really deep with this, but life can be so hard sometimes because in a situation where you would thrive and shine, that might be the situation you're in, or the situation that you're in, your characteristics automatically become liabilities. And that's sad. That's kind of what happens to Lydia, is her situation makes it so that these traits about her become liabilities. Does that make sense what I'm saying? I don't know if I'm getting too deep in this, but I like I said, I internalize stories. So I'm like, how do my characteristics affect those around me in my situation? Are they strengths right now or not? And how do you grapple with that as a 15-year-old, you know?
That's so true. And I suppose she has other just like like in this sense just like natural things going against her, one being a woman, so she's not as respected in society in general, her age, and also the fact that the Bennets aren't necessarily of like higher class. But were the roles different? Like if we think about Emma, like Emma can be like a bit like crazy and wild, and she's like flirting with Frank Churchill at the picnic, and she's just having a good time. She's having a laugh, and she is respected among her peers. She makes mistakes and she tries to own them. You know, it's
right.
She's not too dissimilar to the way that Lydia is, but Emma has the benefit of status, and so people just admire her, and they think she's wonderful for it, and like her confidence and the fact that she is playful is like what makes her charming. But in someone like Lydia, it's almost like a problem.
Right. I have never made the connection between Emma and Lydia, but that is so true. That is so true. She's got the status, she's got siblings that have their kids, and she's like the young fun aunt, like totally. And she's like Lydia, but has different. Dang, sorry. I'm like, that is mind blowing to me to think that Emma's characteristics are seen as like charming and fun, but she's got the status, she's got the even just the like she has, you said she's the youngest, but it's not like they're all in the household at once. She's the youngest, but by like a wide margin instead of having like all the kids so close together. Am I right with that? I don't know. That is so interesting.
Yeah.
I've never compared them, but now I'm like, yeah, that is exactly what it is. That is so... Thank you for sharing that, because now I'm like, I'm going to totally be like, did you know that Emma and Lydia are pretty much going through the same thing? But
really
one
similar.
got taken advantage of, and one had a knight, like literally a knight coming, like, oh my gosh.
Literally, yeah, exactly. And Austen does this a lot across all of her books, where she plays around, where she's like, there's no like straight answer with Austen of like what is good and what is bad, because you see this a lot of like Mary Crawford as well. Like Mary Crawford is very similar to Lizzie Bennet, and yet we are kind of shoehorned to see Mary Crawford as a more villainous figure, and Fanny is like the angelic one. But actually, if Mary Crawford's, you know, say we took out a couple of things like her wanting Tom to be dead and stuff, like certain things, yes, are quite bad, but if you just went off her like core characteristics, she would be like Lizzie Bennet, and everybody loves Lizzie. So yeah, like Jane said, hey, if this character or this type of person is in this situation, add a few things, boom, different. Like that. And that's what you were saying, like his situation matters.
Yes, it totally does. It's so important. And so I think just as human beings, we are aware of our strengths and weaknesses, and we can't control our situation all the time, but I think that we do have the ability to like kind of adapt. And I say that not saying like, oh, we should change ourselves, but I think that just to deal with kind of what life throws at us, just to do our best to kind of take care of ourselves. I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying, but yeah.
No, it does. And I think as well, like, obviously give ourselves grace that Lydia doesn't get, in the sense that when you grow up, you change, you evolve, you develop. I think we see that really clearly with Emma, like the way that she develops throughout the novel. And by the end of it, you know, she's
better than she started.
She was better, and she's learnt from her mistakes, and that's like life, isn't it? Like you grow up, like me at 15 and me now, entirely different people. Well, not entirely different people, but we have very different approaches to life, and like what I would have thought was funny or things that I would have done back then, I wouldn't dream of doing now. Like it's just, you behave differently like the longer that you live your own life and your own society, and you basically become the person that you want to be, as opposed to just kind of like your default.
Right. Exactly. I agree. I totally agree.
We're just like deep psychoanalysis of Lydia Bennet.
This is deep. This is really deep. This has gone from she's ridiculous, which she is, the most determined flirt that ever made her family ridiculous, but also got to give her some grace and give her some credit. So I'm coming away from this definitely with a different perspective of Lydia than I ever did. That is for sure.
And so I'm like totally feeling bad about my episode title now. I'm like, this series, I'm like throwing Lydia in here, but I'm like,
no.
Ellis for liability, question mark. Like, is she not? We're not sure.
But is she? Yeah, I don't know. You gotta think.
Oh, oh man. Well, there we go. See, I said to you at the start, I was like, I wasn't sure where to fall. Is she a mean girl and crazy, or is she actually a victim of her own, a victim of Elizabeth's story? And
yeah,
I think she's more on the victim side. Was there anything else in your notes that you wanted to add?
No, I don't think so. We've pretty much covered everything that I've been thinking. So yeah.
That was so fun though. It was so good to like chat about her, and like there's some minor characters who I feel like have a lot more in the plot. Like sometimes there's like certain, like Mary Crawford, she's not really a minor character, but you know, she's a secondary character.
Yeah.
But Lydia is a secondary character. She doesn't actually have much airtime talking in the book. She's not really spoken about that much. Like really a lot of what we have is just the way that she interacts with the plot or interferes in the plot, or the way that what that means for Elizabeth. And so but it was still good to kind of look at like her from a different perspective. Is she a liability? Is she not? You know, does she deserve a little bit of sympathy? Yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah, that was super fun. Thank you for letting me come and be part of your podcast. It's so much fun. I love this. As an avid podcaster, I'm like, this is just the best. And Jane, talking about anything Jane is like just so great.
Gotta be here for it.
Yeah.
So do you want to let people know where they can find you? Obviously your podcast, but Instagram and everything.
Yeah, so if you want to come hang out, I mean, I am just here for a good time. So if you want to like come be book friends with someone who pretty much loves everything, that's me. On Bookstagram, it's StoryHooked, one word, kind of like storybook, but with an H. And then I'm not on like TikTok or anything like that, but just basically Bookstagram. And the podcast, you can look up StoryHooked Podcast or just follow the link in my bio on Instagram is kind of how you can access that. But yeah,
I'll add all the links below in the bio as well, guys. And as always, you can follow me over on Instagram at What the Austen. I share all updates about the podcast on there. The book club has started now on the Patreon page, so you can still join. Obviously, you can join at any point. But yeah, go and check that out because we have started. And yeah, that's everything from us today. And I will see you in another episode.